Break with Reality Part 20. The rushing cacophony of the wind and pounding rain from rapidly escalating storm developing outside dulled suddenly as Dougal struggled to close the door behind him and Kirsten. "Je vais vous taire tout!" the crazy skipper screamed, embarking on a mad rush towards them. He raised his machete and swung it down, fully intending, it seemed, to slice Kirsten in half. She let out an ear-piercing scream, raised her arms, jerking to one side in the last microsecond and managing to dodge the blow. The captain's weapon hit the top of the side console, cutting into it like an axe. Splinters flew in the air and they all stared at the hard surface, imagining for an instant the effect that would have on a human head. The captain roared with frustration as he struggled to free the blade from the wood. Eventually he jerked it loose, pulling so hard the blunt side of the blade hit his own head, with yet another facial injury adding fresh blood to what was already trickling down his face. He turned to Dougal with the same evil grin, lurched forward, again swinging the blade high in an arc. Dougal looked around in panic, spied a short deck brush lying against the bulkhead, which he grabbed and held up with both hands in an attempt to parry the blow. It snapped like a matchstick, leaving him with a piece of splintered wood in each hand. "Out the door, everybody!" Dougal shouted to the others, throwing his now useless wooden sticks at the captain, who fended him off with another swipe from his weapon. Laurie raced across to join Kirsten, who by now was rattling the handle up and down. "Fucking thing's stuck!" cried Kirsten. Both women turned back in time to see the screaming madman prepare himself for a terminal lunge at Dougal. The flash of the blade as it came down was the last thing visible to Dougal as he closed his eyes tightly, certain that this was finally to be his end. He braced himself for the impact of the weapon, lowering his head, raising his hands and shoulders, eyes tight shut, grimacing. "Ugh!" Dougal heard the sound of someone being hurt, but took a second to realise it wasn't himself. Slowly he lifted his head back up, opening his eyes. He was met with the sight of Keir standing grappling with the lunatic, at least one of the fingers in his left hand. The assailant managed to swing the machete in an upwards arc, however, and Dougal winced as with the blunt edge the captain caught Keir between the legs. Unbelievably, Keir hardly flinched, absorbing the blow with a silent deep breath. Instead, everyone was then subjected to the trauma-inducing sound of cracking bones as Keir bent and broke the skipper's middle finger. At the same time, he stamped hard with his right boot against the captain's kneecap, bending the leg in the opposite direction it was meant to go. Dougal was surprised then with the sight of the bright yellow box that had been previously lodged in the window appearing above the head of the half-crippled captain. The box then swung down with some force, crunching on the head and shoulders of Leroux, reducing the unfortunate skipper to a collapsed, groaning heap on the bridge floor. The smiling faces of Kirsten and Laurie, holding a rope handle each of the yellow wooden box, dangling between them, beamed at one another. "Girl power," said Kirsten to Laurie. "Fuck me," said Dougal, staring at the word "flare" stencilled on the front of the box. "Saved by two fearsome ladies wielding a box of 70s fashion trousers." He struggled up from the floor. "Aye, you did good, girls," Keir agreed, winking. Dougal turned his attention to Keir. "Wah, cheers to you as well, pal," he said, slapping his friend's shoulder. "Guys," murmured Laurie, standing opposite them, face now dropped. "Aye, no bother, pal," Keir replied to Dougal, winking and tilting his head, taking no notice of Laurie. "Guys," it was Kirsten this time, more insistent. "Close though, eh?" Dougal continued, ignoring the women as well, still talking to Keir. "Nice touch with the broken finger. Where did you..." That was just part of the SAS training," Keir started to explain. He moved his stance slightly and raised a finger. "Now, guys!" Laurie and Kirsten chorused together, loudly this time. "I think you need to look here," Laurie was now shouting, both her and Kirsten staring wide-eyed, pointing at the window in the front of the bridge. Keir and Dougal finally both looked round to see what they were on about. "What?" Dougal said, squinting through the rainy view. "Wait, is that what I think it is?" "Well, I'll be..." started Keir, struggling to focus at the dim vision in the rain-lashed distance through the window. "Windmills!" screamed Laurie and Kirsten. The boat was heading straight into the middle of an offshore wind farm. "We've got to turn this fucking thing round," Keir shouted. Dougal raced around to the front of the bridge and grabbed the wheel, spinning it furiously in a clockwise direction. The vessel kept going straight ahead. "Guys, I dinna think this thing's working," Dougal said in a small voice, continuing to spin the wheel. "No, them things are for show these days," cried Laurie. "It's bound to be something electronic. Quick!" They all darted around, pulling, pushing, and turning any lever or knob they could find, hoping to make some difference to the direction or speed of the ship. Nothing seemed to work. The vessel stayed on course, pushing through the water relentlessly towards the forest of spinning turbines they could see ahead of them through the wind and rain. "It's all been disabled or overridden," Keir said. "There's nothing for it. We're going to have to abandon ship." Dougal ran to the door, jerking it open with an almighty tug, and went out into the top observation deck, shielding his eyes from the howling wind and rain pelting on his arms and face, feeling more like small stones than water droplets. He forced his eyes open, searching desperately below on the lower decks for any sign of lifeboats. Nothing there. He ran to the opposite side of the bridge deck and looked down again. "Bingo," murmured Dougal. There he could see an orange Dotacraft sitting in some sort of quick-release cradle on the side deck. It was a small diesel-powered rescue boat. "Come on," he cried, waving his arms to alert his three friends. "We haven't got much time. Get in this fucking boat." They sped down the slippery flights of stairs towards the small craft, helping each other up as they each invariably slid, tripped and fell down the rows of metal treads. Eventually they reached the bottom, and their next problem became apparent. The boat had to be lowered into the water using a davit crane that was hanging over it. No one knew how to work it, or so they thought. Out of the corner of his eye, Dougal caught a brief glimpse of a tartan lumberjacket then, jerking his head to get it into his line of sight, so it was Keir climbing a vertical ladder. "Found the controls!" he cried, then started furiously pulling at levers at the crane station, pushing buttons. A loud wailing sound reached everyone's ears then, and the davit started creaking and groaning. First it lurched downwards, Keir thankfully managing to stop it just in time before the arm of the small crane crushed the wheelhouse of the rescue boat, then upwards until the slack of the wire rope cradle was taken up. The orange vessel rose about 6 inches into the air, then stopped dead. The crane would lift no further, or at least it stopped moving because, judging by the pitch and increase in volume the hydraulics were making and the tension that seemed to be building up on the ropes, the davit was straining to lift but couldn't. "The catches!" shouted Keir, pointing at some handles that were visible around the edges of the lifeboat. He ran down and joined the rest of them, who were already pulling at the metal release mechanisms, desperately trying to free the stricken sea vehicle. A scream that would have chilled the soul of the devil himself rang out in the air, and they all looked up to see the fearsome sight of the mad captain, standing at top deck level, machete glittering through the rain as he swung it round above his head. He started to painfully limp his way down the stairway. Dougal freed the first catch. The small boat lurched up at one end, and he moved quickly across to help Laurie free hers, which they quickly unlatched between them. Kirsten got hers loosened and released. With a loud clunk, the last one was freed by Keir, and the boat was left swinging on the ropes. "Jump on it!" Dougal shouted, and everybody clambered aboard the wavering boat. "I'll lower it down." He ran up to the controls and found the right lever just as the skipper started climbing the platform he was on. The small craft swung away from the boat. The skipper reached the top of the vertical ladder, and Dougal looked past him to see the looming shapes of 2 wind turbines, massive, barely metres away from the front of the ship. Come on, Dougal pleaded with the hydraulic controls. The boat seemed to take forever to lower into the frothing sea below. Ha, ha, ha. The growl of the captain's laugh was in Dougal's ears. He turned and the fiend was standing over him, the shining blade high above his head, ready to strike. Die, pirate! his eyes widened, his lips curled back in an evil grimace as his arm swung down, ready to finish off his victim at last. Dougal pulled his fist back and with all the force he could muster, punched Leroux firmly in the stomach. The older man wheezed and grunted, and Dougal was aware of a blinding pain as the machete caught him on the shoulder before falling from the captain's grasp and landing at their feet. Then, as hard as he could, Dougal pulled his neck back and headbutted him in the face, feeling and hearing the cartilage in Leroux's nose crack as he did so. The skipper staggered back a step and Dougal seized the opportunity. He slapped a red mushroom-shaped button with the legend "Release" under it and then dived off the side of the platform, landing face down on top of the small wheelhouse of the tiny rescue craft 5 metres below in the swell of the North Sea. Winded, he heard a roar as the small diesel engine burst into life, Keir at the controls. The engine note increased in volume by quite a bit as the propeller spun into action. The daughter craft started to move, but no sooner had it started than it came to an abrupt halt. "The rope!" Kirsten screamed. Dougal managed to struggle onto his back to see her, pointing at a taut painter line still attaching them to the bigger vessel. A screaming roar jerked his attention higher up as, silhouetted by the weak emergency lighting emanating from the ship's wheelhouse, he could see the outline of the pursuer, now standing wavering on the top of the railings at the davit controls. He launched his trusted machete down in their direction, and Dougal saw it flash through the air, closing his eyes as it landed with a thud beside him. He opened his eyes again, only to see the blade had gouged its way through his calf muscle, pinning his leg to the wooden roof of the tiny wheelhouse he lay on. Dougal screamed with a ferocity that surprised even himself, as the delayed searing pain shot into his brain. He felt himself go light-headed and had a sudden urge just to lie down and let whatever was going to happen happen. He lay back, turned to his side, and Kirsten was there. She reached over and after a couple of attempts managed to pull the machete from the damaged leg. She jumped down, swung the blade and chopped the tight, rigid mooring rope stretched between the two boats. With a twanging sound and a lurch which nearly dumped all of them in the sea, their small escape vessel was free. Dougal looked back at Captain Jacques Leroux on the deck just as the first windmill with a deafening screeching sound toppled and landed with an explosive crash on the boat, one of the still spinning blades crushing the mad screaming captain as it landed. Dougal breathed out, emptying his lungs, closing his eyes, and in the darkness that engulfed him, through the throbbing sound of the rescue craft's engine and the loud creaking of twisting metal coming from the direction of the boat, drifted into oblivion.